Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that digs into the sources, finds the core insights, and basically gets you up to speed fast.
Yep, cutting through all the noise.
Exactly. And today, wow, we are going deep into Star Wars lore, like foundational stuff. We're talking about the Sith.
But not just the Sith in general.
No, we're focusing on one specific figure, someone whose name maybe you don't instantly recognize, Ajunta Pall. That's Ajunta Pall.
Right.
But his impact, huge, millennia spanning, and his story. It's complex, compelling, and honestly, kind of surprisingly remorseful in the end.
Definitely. Our mission today is really to unpack the journey of this guy, the very first Dark Lord of the Sith.
From Jedi Master all the way to, well, Dark Lord.
And even beyond death into his spiritual reflections. We think there are some surprising insights here, whether you're a hardcore Star Wars fan or, just dipping your toes into the deeper lore.
We'll look at what drove him, what he actually created, how his legacy stuck around.
And yeah, that introspection bit, it's quite a character exploration.
Okay, so let's get into it. Ajunta Pall. Where does his story even begin? Not in shadow, right?
No, quite the opposite. He starts out firmly in the light, in the Jedi Order. Our sources place him as a Force-sensitive human, coming up not long after the First Great Schism.
Which was already a pretty shaky time for the galaxy, dealing with divisions in the Force.
Exactly. And Paul, he rose through the ranks, Jedi Knight, then Jedi Master. A respected figure.
But he didn't just stick to the Jedi playbook, did he?
Not at all. That's where things get really interesting. As a master, he dove deep into, well, alchemy. Almost the mystical side of things.
Alchemy. Like trying to create gold.
Yeah, not quite. More profound, actually. He was exploring the secrets of life itself. And he apparently found the ability to create and even shape life through the Force.
Whoa, okay, that sounds powerful and maybe a little scary.
Definitely scary to the Jedi Order. See, the Jedi philosophy was about serving the Force, understanding it. Paul, it seems, wanted to control it, to bend life itself to his will. That's a very different path.
Yeah, I can see why the Jedi Council wouldn't be thrilled.
Thrilled is an understatement. They saw his discovery as an abomination, a total perversion of the Force. They immediately tried to shut it down, erase the practice.
They actually barred his teachings. And his followers, too.
Completely. Labeled him a pawn of the dark side, straight up.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about the power, it was the principle. Life was sacred, a gift from the Force, not something for mortals to manufacture.
So a fundamental clash of beliefs.
Precisely. And Pal and his followers, they didn't take kindly to being shut down. They saw it as Jedi arrogance, stifling knowledge.
So they pushed back.
They declared war.
Just like that. Wow. And this kicks off the 100-year darkness.
That's the one. A century of conflict. It wasn't just a squabble. It was really the galaxy's first big ideological war between what would become the light side and the dark side traditions.
And Pal was right in the thick of it.
Oh yeah. He was High General for his dark Jedi forces. Sources say he personally took down more than a dozen Jedi Knights in the final battle alone on Korbos. He was incredibly powerful.
And even that wasn't enough in the end.
Ultimately, no. He and his dark Jedi were defeated, captured. The Jedi stripped them of their ranks, took their weapons,
And kicked them out.
exiled them, banished from Republic space entirely, cast out into the unknown.
So these exiles, where do they go? What do they do?
It was desperate. They jumped from planet to planet, looking for somewhere, anywhere, habitable, a new start.
And eventually?
Eventually, their search led them way out to the Outer Rim, to a harsh desert planet called Korriban.
Korriban. Now that name is familiar. The Sith homeworld, right?
It became the Sith homeworld, yes. At the time, it was inhabited by the native Sith species.
Were they? Like the Sith we know later, with lightsabers and empires?
Not exactly. They were Force-sensitive, definitely. But technologically kind of primitive compared to the exiled Dark Jedi.
But they had their own understanding of the Force.
They did. Sources mention a creative, maybe more intuitive grasp of the Force, something the Dark Jedi hadn't quite seen before.
So the exiles arrive. How did that go down with the locals?
Well, initially there was resistance. The Sith King, Hakagram Grouch, wasn't about to just roll over.
Makes sense.
But Ajunta Pall, he was smart, strategic. He didn't just launch a full frontal assault.
What did he do?
He targeted the king's inner circle, specifically his shadow hand, basically, the king's top advisor and enforcer. Paul managed to turn him, convince him to betray his king.
Ouch. Betrayal from within.
Exactly. And it culminated dramatically. Paul himself executed King Grouch, used the king's own sword to do it. Brutal, decisive.
And the rest of the Sith species, what was their reaction?
Pure awe. apparently. They saw that exile ships, their tech, their mastery of the Force, it was beyond anything they knew. They started worshiping them as gods.
The gods. Seriously.
Seriously. Their Kisai priest, cast the spiritual leaders, actually believed Ajunta Pall was a manifestation of one of their deities, the left-handed god Typha Gem.
Imagine going from exiled outcast to literal god king.
Quite the turnaround, right? And with the natives now seeing him that way, Paul solidified his power. He became their
Jinari.
Dark Lord. The very first Dark Lord of the Sith.
Wow. And were the other exiles okay with this?
Well, it was a position definitely coveted by others, like Sorza Sin, another powerful exile. But Paul got there first. Interestingly, though, he didn't claim the title Sithari.
Sithari, what's that?
A prophesied ultimate ruler, sort of a chosen one for the Sith. Paul seemed more pragmatic, focused on building his actual power base rather than claiming some mystical destiny. Maybe he already sensed the infighting that title could cause.
Smart move, maybe. So, as the first Dark Lord, Jinari, what did he build?
He founded the first Sith Empire, started right there on Korriban, and expanded outwards, bringing other worlds under his control, cementing his legacy.
Did he have, like, a capital? A throne world?
He did. Sources mention he built a massive citadel for himself on a planet called Ziost, that's Z-E-E-Ost. Became a major Sith world later on.
So he ruled for a long time.
For many decades, yeah. Built this empire, led his people. Eventually, though, he died. Natural causes, it seems.
And his burial. Back on Korriban.
Return to Korriban, yes. They built him this enormous tomb in what would later be called the Valley of the Dark Lords, a monument to the first Jinari.
But that wasn't the end of his story, was it? This is where it gets really weird, right?
Exactly. Because Ajunta Pall didn't just die. His spirit lingered, persisted within his tomb.
How? How is that even possible?
That forbidden knowledge again. His mastery of alchemy. He somehow used it to bind his consciousness, his spirit, to the physical world, even after his body gave out.
Incredible. Dark side power sustaining him beyond death.
But here's the twist. Over the centuries, trapped in his tomb, his spirit changed. He started to reflect, to question his actions as a Sith Lord.
Question them, like regret.
Regret, yes.
Yeah.
He apparently watched or sensed how later Sith Lords constantly turned on each other, how they drove their own order towards destruction again and again.
So the first Dark Lord started having second thoughts. That's unexpected.
It really is. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Can even someone who went that deep into the dark side find remorse? Can that influence be overcome?
It's a heavy thought. And there's that legend, too, about his lightsaber.
Ah, yes. The story goes that after his death, the Jedi Council somehow got hold of his lightsaber.
The Jedi kept a Sith Lord's lightsaber. Why?
They supposedly stored it in the Great Jedi Library on Coruscant. Maybe as a trophy, maybe a warning, maybe just containment. It's a fascinating little detail.
Okay, so his spirit is in the tomb, reflecting. For millennia.
For millennia. Until the time of the Jedi Civil War, thousands of years later.
And someone finally visits the tomb.
Someone very important, Revan. Jedi Knight Revan enters Ajunta Pall's tomb on Korriban.
Why was Revan there? Just exploring?
No, it was strategic. Revan was trying to gain prestige within the Sith Academy located nearby on Korriban. The plan was to retrieve Pall's sword, not the lightsaber, his actual physical sword, to impress the Sith.
Why impress the Sith?
Ultimately, Revan needed access to ancient Rakatan star maps. Retrieving Pall's sword was a means to an end, a way to gain favor and access information leading to the Starforge.
Got it. So Revan goes into the tomb and meets the ghost.
Meets the spirit of Ajunta Pall. Yeah. And this is the pivotal moment. Pall appears, but he's not the proud, terrifying Dark Lord Revan might have expected.
What was he like?
Full of regret, shame even. He told Revan explicitly that the downfall of the Sith wasn't because of the Jedi defeating them after the 100-year darkness.
It wasn't. Then what was it?
It was the Sith themselves. Their constant infighting, their betrayals, their hunger for power that turned them against each other. Pall saw it clearly from his long, spectral existence. He said they brought themselves to the brink of annihilation.
Wow. He basically confessed that the entire Sith project was inherently self-destructive, from the founder himself.
Nothing but remorse. And then, just before his spirit faded, he hinted at some secret source of Sith power. But his spectral form was kind of confused completely. He couldn't tell if Revan had already found this power or was about to, and then he was gone.
Leaving Revan and us with a lot to think about. Okay, let's try and unpack this. Ajunta Pall's whole arc, Jedi Master, forbidden knowledge, Dark Lord, founder of an empire, and then centuries of regret.
It's an incredible story. And connecting it to the bigger picture, it gives the definitive origin point for the Sith Empire in the Legends continuity. It shows how a fracture within the Jedi Order, driven by this quest for forbidden power, literally created their own worst enemy.
And that post-mortem regret? It's huge. It offers this unique insight into the dark side, doesn't it, from the guy who started it all, saying basically, this path eats itself.
Absolutely critical perspective. It highlights the self-destructive nature inherent in that kind of power, that philosophy. It's not just an external enemy they fight. The biggest threat is often internal.
So for you, listening now, especially if you love digging into this deeper Star Wars stuff, Ajunta Pall isn't just some ancient name.
No, he's foundational. His story helps explain the why behind the Sith. Their origins, their power, but also that constant cycle of self-destruction and internal conflict that plagues them throughout history. It really sets the stage.
It really does.
And maybe it leaves us with a final question to chew on. Paul's spirit found remorse. He understood the fatal flaw was within the Sith philosophy itself.
Okay.
So what does that tell us? This realization from the very first Dark Lord. Does it suggest that the dark side path is ultimately futile, inherently self-destructive?
Something to think about next time you watch those lightsabers clash in that galaxy far, far away. What does the Founder's regret truly signify?